Liadriel's oath, this is no fit place to be. Sven Hammerhelm scowled and looked around sharply at Torres. The elf had stopped short in a dark, cramped passage and was fastidiously beating dust from his jerkin for what seemed like the 100th time. We all know you've no liking for being under honest rock, grated the dwarf, but must you make your girlish screams so loud? I'd sooner find trouble than have it find us. And what trouble might that be? It seems to me we've travelled a dozen leagues down these rat holes and met nothing but some nervous bats and an overfed beetle. A fine song they'll make about our deeds in this place. It's fit only for the dead and for your misshapen relatives. Heinrich Lowen stepped between them before the argument could develop any further. We all heard what the chief priest said about the things in this place. If that, whatever it was... Lich, put in Magnus absently. The wizard's eyes were narrowed, straining to see what lay in the darkness ahead. If this Lich is indeed somewhere in these catacombs, Heinrich continued, we'll need all our wits about us if we're to survive, let alone succeed. I know it's cramped and dirty down here. The dwarf made a disgusted noise deep in his throat. But Sven's right. I was taught that surprise is a vital tactical element, so let's not make so much noise that we bring I don't know what down on our heads. The warrior looked from elf to dwarf and back again. Neither looked happy, but it seemed that dissension had been avoided. As they turned to move on down the passage, Magnus shot Heinrich a half-smile and a nod. Heinrich raised his eyes to the ceiling in response. Sven and Torres were good companions and sturdy fighters, each in his own way, but the generations of hatred between their races had left a troublesome mark. At the sound of the scream, Torres whirled and loosed an arrow in a single smooth motion. The missile passed straight through the misty, luminescent figure that was rushing up the passage behind them. Magnus rummaged in his belt pouch, and Heinrich readied his sword and prayed silently. If an arrow couldn't hurt the thing, could a sword? He allowed his eyes to flick quickly to one side, to where the wizard stood. Magnus should be chanting by now. What was wrong? From the corner of his eye, Heinrich saw Magnus pulling the stopper from a small earthenware flask with his teeth, and he hurled the contents at the onrushing figure. In his other hand, the wizard had a small jet carving of an open doorway with a raven perched on top. He held it before him like a shield, and Heinrich guessed it must be some kind of magical amulet. The liquid from Magnus's flask struck the ghostly figure like a breeze ripping through a plume of smoke. With a despairing wail, the thing tore into shreds and disappeared. What in Sigmar's name was... Heinrich had no time to finish the question. From the other side of them came a volley of arrows. Reflex made him duck. 3 of the missiles thudded into his shield, and a 4th hissed through the plume of his helmet. Sven was already charging up the passage, covering his square body as much as possible with his shield. Magnus was holding out his amulet with one hand and rummaging for spell ingredients with the other. Torres crouched beside Heinrich, his face even paler than normal. An arrow was sticking out of his shoulder, and Heinrich could see that the shaft was not of wood, but of bone. He looked up and saw Sven about to swing his axe at a group of walking, living skeletons. "Sigmar," he murmured. "It's true." Hello and welcome to Always Bored, Never Boring. I am a huge fan of Advanced Heroquest. This will not come as a surprise to regular viewers. I rate Advanced Heroquest as one of the best dungeon crawlers ever, and I placed it 4th on my list of greatest games of all time. I have compiled the best parts from several copies of the game to make a mega edition. I am gradually collecting all of the Old Hammer miniatures associated with the game in any capacity, more on that soon, and I crafted my own complete copy of the game's only expansion, unless you include the paint set, Terror in the Dark. Videos about all of this are available in my Advanced Heroquest playlist. Terror in the Dark really is an incredible expansion. It may not have included any new miniatures, but it added so much material and really fleshed out the core set. So naturally, I was stupidly excited to discover that the author of that expansion, Graeme Davis, has been posting some never-before-seen outtakes from Terror in the Dark on his WordPress blog, which you will find linked in the video description below. I am sure some of the people watching this video will already follow Graeme and will be aware of this content, but I wanted to talk briefly about it for those people who may have missed it. Apparently, the expansion we finally got was very different to what Graeme initially submitted. In fact, Games Workshop only used about half of his material, and then filled the rest of the expansion with some articles that had previously appeared in White Dwarf magazine and the huge quest for the Lichmaster adventure. While everything in the expansion is gold, the amount of quality content left on the cutting room floor is criminal. I copied all of the material from Graeme's site, including the awesome piece of fiction I opened this video with, and I dropped that material into a Word document for personal use. The document is almost 80 pages long, and it is a treasure trove of cool ideas that any fan of Advanced Heroquest is going to want to check out. Of particular note is the Quest Machine, a system of tables that could be used to roll up countless random adventures using a system similar to the one that Games Workshop would subsequently use a few years later in 1995 for Warhammer Quest. I would love to see someone work with Graeme to make this material into a quality PDF that fans could download or print. It would be a real gift. But what exactly was cut from Advanced Heroquest? First, new hazards. I love hazards. For me, Advanced Heroquest really captures the true essence of exploring a dungeon. Long corridors, empty rooms, a sense of growing unease, a brief explosion of deadly combat, and then more long corridors. The game is much more than a series of combats. It feels very real, and hazards help to breathe life into the environment and create interesting narrative situations. We get a new table containing 12 hazards, some of which feature rules for items of original HeroQuest furniture like the sarcophagus and workbench. The idea is, when you encounter a hazard room you roll a dice. On an odd number, you use hazards from the base game, on an even number, you use this table instead. I rather like the Poltergeist, who lobs objects at every hero in the room each turn, and the Marshlight, which hypnotizes heroes and lures them into a chasm. Next, we have an extended list of monsters. This is something of a weakness in Terror in the Dark. There weren't enough new enemies. These outtakes have full stat profiles for a massive selection of undead enemies. Ghouls, ghoul chieftains, ghosts, liches, mummies, necromancers, skeletons, skeleton warriors, skeleton archers, spectres, undead champions, undead warlords, vampire lords, lesser vampires, wights, wraiths, and zombies. Additionally, we now have stat profiles for a lot of other monsters, including creatures that would eventually appear in Warhammer Quest. Giant bats, giant beetles, giant rats, giant snakes, giant spiders, bat swarms, rat swarms, beetle swarms, gorgons, constructs, witches, cultists, priests, and sacrificial humans. These last two also being possible NPCs that will help the heroes. The next section is really exciting, the Dark Wizard Spellbook. I love the spell system in Advanced Heroquest, and one of the biggest problems is that only a limited number of official spellbooks were ever released. Naturally, the fans have stepped in creating their own homebrew spellbooks, but now we have a Dark Magic spellbook too. The intention is that this isn't for heroes, but can be used to randomly allocate dark spells to any evil magic users the heroes meet. However, I see no reason why you couldn't make yourself a Dark Wizard playable character. Heck, your Chaos Sorcerer could go on an adventure with a Chaos Warrior, a Chaos Dwarf, and a Dark Elf, and they could fight the forces of good for a change. Why not? Then we get to the real meat of the omissions, the Quest Machine. Something truly awesome, gifting Advanced Heroquest players with almost endlessly replayable random dungeons. Why this would be omitted is beyond me. It was clearly ditched in favour of the quest for the Lichmaster adventure, something more controlled and focused. It's very simple. You roll 2d12. The first dice tells you if the place you are exploring is good, evil, or neutral, and then the second dice roll tells you what kind of place it is. So if you roll a 3 and a 1, you are going to a royal tomb. Having picked a spot, you then roll another d12 to determine the nature of the quest. There are 5 possible results for each location. For each mission there is a brief for the hero so they know what they are doing, and then information for the Games Master, including details of which monster tables they should use. And yes, these outtakes do include a large selection of new monster tables themed around specific types of location. This is great stuff, and even if you never use the quest machine to randomly generate quests, there are stacks of excellent ideas in there that you could draw on for creating your own quests. These outtakes even introduce side quests, which feel a little bit throwaway. It's an idea that isn't fully fleshed out, but it's certainly a good foundation for someone to build on. The idea is that before going on a quest you roll a d12 for each hero. Any hero scoring 10 or more has been approached to complete an additional objective. You roll again to see exactly what that objective is. You may be asked to acquire some mummy bandages, which you can do by destroying a mummy, or you may be asked for a book of lore, which you can acquire from one specific type of hazard room. This is all fairly basic, and the rewards are generally a bit of extra spending cash for the hero in question, but it's still nice to see some extra depth. And as I said, while this doesn't feel like a particularly robust system, it wouldn't take much to expand on it. And as if that wasn't enough, we also get more tables of items. There is a table of magic items specifically intended to combat the undead. Advanced Heroquest is normally pretty stingy at dishing out magic stuff, and the items in this table are even rarer, but more special stuff is always appreciated. If you get the chance to roll up a magic treasure in your games, you first roll a d12. On a 1 to 11 you use the regular magic treasure table, but if you roll a 12 you roll on this new table instead. Admittedly, some of the stuff here is crazy overpowered, especially the sword that can instantly destroy demons, but nevertheless, all good food for thought. And at this point, I think I will call it a day. I could have gone through all of this stuff in great detail, picking apart what I like and don't like, but there's so much there, and any fans of the game are going to have a real blast discovering it all for themselves, rather than listening to me dissect it all. Ultimately, this is a little piece of Advanced Heroquest's history, a peek behind the curtain, a glimpse at what could have been. For me, this is incredibly interesting and exciting. I would love to know why some of these elements were cut from the expansion, and I'm very happy they have had the chance to see the light of day. So, cheers Graeme, you are already responsible for countless hours of adventures, and now you will be responsible for countless more. Remember, the link for Graeme's blog is in the video description below, and as always, if you like this video please consider pressing the like button. If you really like this video please consider subscribing if you don't already do so, and hopefully I'll see you all again very soon. Bye bye everyone, bye bye.